Hi, my name is Dana Sawyer, and I am going to give a little lecture about our course on opening the inner eye, an introduction to the world's mystical traditions. Uh, as I said, my name is Dana Sawyer. A lot of you know me. I was a professor of religion and philosophy at the Maine College of Art for almost 30 years, and I'm still professor emeritus there, and my wife and I sometimes lead study abroads in India. For more than 20 years, I was the world religions professor for the Bangor Theological Seminary. And my expertise is in Hinduism and Buddhism most specifically, but because those traditions are strongly mystical in content, I became interested long ago in mystical states of consciousness and comparative mysticism. Besides that, I am from Maine. In fact, I'm in Bar Harbor, Maine right now, and I grew up about an hour away from here, so I'm at home today in many ways. This introduction will serve as an introduction to all three sections of this Zoom course. So we'll have three sections, one on Asian mysticism covering Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, and one on Abrahamic traditions, so we'll deal with Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, or I should say the mystical traditions inside of those religions. And then in the third section, we'll have three sessions on mysticism outside of the religions. What does mystical experience tell us, if anything, about the nature of human consciousness and the potentialities of human consciousness? So we'll have some fun in that last section, looking at how mystical experience is being investigated today in lots of interesting and unusual ways, including studies at Johns Hopkins on psychedelic experience, studies with sensory deprivation tanks, and other techniques of consciousness expansion. So that comes up in the third and last section. Three provisos as we get started. First of all, let me say you can take any one of those three sections, and this introduction applies to all three of them. So the provisos, first of all, this is not a how-to course. So I'm not going to get down on the floor and do some yoga or teach you how to meditate or anything like that. I hope that's not disappointing, but this is really a course focused on knowledge about what the mystical traditions are all about. Two, I'm not going to cover shamanic traditions for two reasons. One, time. We can only cover so many traditions in one course. And two, I'm not an expert on the shamanic traditions, so I really I respect them profoundly and have a deep interest, but it's a very dilettante interest and not my expertise. And then third, the third proviso is I'm not going to cover all quote-unquote mystical experiences, including paranormal experiences. So I won't talk about telepathy. I won't talk about precognition. I won't talk about states of possession trance or anything like that. Not because I'm not interested. I'm deeply interested in all those things. But what was considered the mystical experiences that were most central to the religious traditions that we'll look at? That's our focus. So what was primary, or what did they think was essential to their tradition? What were the essential insights that came out of mystical awakening? That's what we're dealing with. Again, in those first two sections, in the last section about mysticism outside of the tradition, our focus is really going to be on what do mystical experiences tell us about the nature of consciousness, and there maybe we'll talk a little bit about paranormal experience. So our guiding questions are going to be, what did the mystics experience? And why was that experience considered valuable? What was it implicit in the experience, self-authenticating in the experience, that made the mystic say, this is something of great significance I must share? And also, why was that experience considered valuable inside of the religious tradition? And was it considered valuable? Because in many cases, mystics have been revolutionaries and sometimes looked at circumspect by the mainstream religious tradition that they were in. So we will look at that. What was experienced and why was it considered valuable? But today, in this short introduction, our question is, who cares? Why should we care what the mystics had to say? Why should we care how their religious traditions interpreted what happened to them? Why even have this course, in other words? We're practical people. We don't need any woo-woo. We got busy lives. We got things to do. We can't be thinking about weird experiences people had in cultures far away and long ago, right? A famous theologian once said, mysticism starts in the mist, has an eye in the middle, and ends in schism. In other words, mysticism is dangerous and better not to pay attention to it. And also, there's the worry about charlatanism. People worry, oh yeah, these mystics, they're always trying to tell you they're enlightened or they're having grand visions, but what they really want is to get in your pocket and get some of your money or get something out of you, one way or the other. You may or may not know that our word, in India there is a sect of sadhus, wandering holy men who are mystics. And these mystics are called fakirs. And when the British encountered them, they often encountered charlatanism. And from the word fakir, we get the word fake and the word faker. So important to know that sometimes mystics are not so mystical, they're just pretending to be. So with these worries, why even take a look at what's on their mind? I'll give you my reason. My reason starts with a bit of a story. First of all, I had an epiphany one time camping with friends. When I was sitting around a campfire, a friend came out of the dark from behind us, behind my back, I couldn't see him, and he said, I want to know what's really going on. He was joining our group. And it hit me like a bucket of cold water. As a person who studied philosophy and religion all of his adult life, I thought to myself, me too. I want to know what's really going on. I don't want to know what's going on. I don't want to only know what's going on. I want to know what's really going on. And of course, a lot of people think nothing's really going on. We have busy lives. We get up, we do our work, we relax in the evening, we go to bed, and we get up in the morning and repeat and take care of the people we love, and that's the whole story of existence. One time a person told me, he said, what do you do? And I said, I teach philosophy. And he said, well, that's a waste of time, isn't it? And I said, do you think so? He said, well, that's looking for meaning and truth, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, that's like looking for rocking horse poop. There's nothing to find. There is no truth or meaning to find. And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, do you think that's the truth? Pointing out that he hadn't avoided philosophy. He was just saying that in his philosophy, philosophy is a waste of time. I didn't go through all that with him, but the point I'm making here is a point really that a philosopher I admire, a French philosopher, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, once said, because we are open to a world, we are condemned to meaning. What he meant by that was, after we're born and as we start to grow, we realize that we are individuals inside of a world filled with other individuals. And because we are present to a world of others, implicit in that is our wondering, what is my relationship to these others? How should I treat other people? How should I treat members of other species? How should I treat this planet that I live on? How should I treat the natural world around me? As we wonder about these questions of our relationship to the other, Merleau-Ponty was saying we are condemned to meaning because of that dynamic. We must find answers to those questions because we're forced to act every day. And how should we act? When we encounter a dog, should we pet it? Should we kick it? Should we think of it as food? Is it a friend? Is it an equal? All of these questions come up. How do we treat the other sex? How many sexes are there? How many genders are there? So these questions are inescapable. And when we understand that we're condemned to meaning, we understand that every day we act on the basis of our thoughts, so we think things and then we act. But all of our thoughts and actions are based on our views and values. In other words, based on our philosophy. And this is why Aldous Huxley once wrote, and I got to put my glasses on for this quote, "To the practical man, the philosophical questions may seem irrelevant, but in fact they are not. It is in the light of our beliefs about the ultimate nature of reality that we formulate our conceptions of right and wrong. And it is in the light of our conceptions of right and wrong that we frame all our conduct, not only in the relations of private life, but also in the sphere of politics and economics. So far from being irrelevant, our metaphysical and philosophical beliefs are the finally determining factor in all of our actions." I entirely agree with that. Now, one thing to understand is that our views and values, our philosophy, if you will, is something that most of us inherit through our culture, all of us, in fact. But many people confine their inquisitiveness, shall we say, only to these inherited views and values. In fact, those inherited views and values we get from our culture, even from the language that we speak, become so ingrained in us that they feel natural. They feel inevitable. They're not. How can we say that they're not? Because they can change very dramatically from culture to culture. They feel natural to everybody, even though they're very different one from the other. When we understand that, we understand that people internalize these views and values to such a point that they become habituated or automized, as psychologists say. Peter Berger, the famous sociologist of religion, says not only do they become internalized and automized, but reinforced by other members of our culture. We know how to behave in our society, and so we co-reinforce this way of looking at the world, this way of acting, and these mores of behavior to such a point, Berger says, that it becomes a consensus trance. Based on what the great American philosopher Lily Tomlin once called our culture's quote-unquote collective hunch about the nature of reality. Our culture has views of how to answer life's largest questions, and we internalize them, and then we act mostly as a kind of wind-up toy made out of meat. Our behavior becomes extremely robotic, and we don't realize that we're operating under a kind of momentum. Okay, so how does our study of mysticism relate to that at all? Have we wandered off track? Not at all. Because, well, for several reasons. One is mystics often feel like their practices and insights are ways of monkey wrenching the robot mind, ways of breaking free of automation, ways of waking up and seeing the world fresh and new. Zen Buddhism comes to mind here. Its entire project is about that, waking up out of automized behavior. And mystics in general are doing what William Blake described, the poet William Blake described as opening the doors of perception, waking up to a broader vision and a broader understanding of the world around them. Saying that, there are ways of knowing the world, and knowing the world is useful because, as I said, we have to cultivate our relationship with the world and the others who live in it. So how do we know about the world? In philosophy, there is a sub-discipline of philosophy called epistemology. And epistemology is the study, the ology, of knowledge and how we know what we know. How do we know what we know? Today it's a beautiful day outside. Beyond the camera, I'm looking at a beautiful view of Cadillac Mountain. I know that Cadillac Mountain is there because it is an object of my direct perception. So direct perception is one way that I know that it was there. Right now, also in my field of vision, water is dripping off the building. So I know that it snowed. I knew it snowed by direct perception 2 days ago, but now I know it snowed by inference. I see melting, so it must have snowed. So there are different ways of knowing things. And our favorite way of knowing today, of course, is the scientific method. That is our preferred way. Is it the only way we can gain meaningful information about reality? Whatever your answer to that question is, the mystics say no. There is another way. There are several other ways. But for the mystics, there is what William James called a noetic way. N-O-E-T-I-C, noetic, from the Greek word nous, which means inner wisdom. So a way of knowing in an inner way, with an inner eye, and gaining an understanding that way. Sorry about that background information. A philosopher I admire very much, Colin Wilson, who was also a British essayist, called that ability to know noetically or inwardly faculty X. I always like that comment, but basically what he was saying is that, and what the mystics are saying, is that we people are constantly watching only one channel on the human TV set, not realizing that other channels are available. Or putting it another way, that consciousness is not fixed, and not only as we experience it in the robot mind, but that consciousness can be broadened and expanded. An analogy I use is the lights in this home can be turned on and off with an on and off switch, but sometimes houses have a rheostat. Lights can be turned on and then turned up. And so consciousness can be expanded and brightened, if you will. And the mystics always send that message back, that there is a third eye or an inner eye that also can be opened, that affords vistas and landscapes, that it's not that it's a colorful and wonderful experience, or at least not only, but that information from that experience can inform our everyday behavior, can inform our philosophy in ways that are meaningful, that inform our thoughts and inform our actions with new information. So this epistemology, this awakening, is what we'll be studying during this course. We'll be considering their news from this other world. And I will say often mystics feel frustrated because they come back with this news, but people aren't willing to listen to them. It would be like if there was a society where everybody was blind and somebody gained vision and could see color. And then they were trying to explain color to the rest of us. And we had no capacity to understand it. And yet they knew how meaningful it would be if we could experience the world in color. So we'll be taking their insights seriously and exploring them together to see if they have any import for our daily lives also. It'll be like a college course in certain kinds of ways, but as you've probably already gathered, it's informal. I hope we have some fun with it. The sessions will be live, so people will be able to ask questions. I'll tell some jokes, but if you're not able to be there for the live sessions, you'll be able to watch the recorded version of it for the whole next week at any time you care to watch it. My axe to grind in the course is accurate description. That's what I'm most interested in. I won't tell you anything about the religious traditions. That's something I made up or isn't a straight down the middle explanation of what is believed inside these religious traditions themselves. Beyond that, I have a deep interest in mysticism. That'll probably come out most fully in the last section of the course. So whether you take one section or all the sections, hope to see you here at some point along the way. Take care.